Hey guys, it's John here. So as you probably know, last week College Board went ahead and released 270 new questions for its question bank that all of you guys use for the SAT. And in addition to that, they re-rated, in terms of the difficulty, 177 different questions too. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and explain what all of this actually means for your next SAT using the data itself, and explain to you what most people are getting wrong about this, because there are a few really big things a lot of people are completely misunderstanding about this, even in many of the videos you might have been watching right now. Okay, let's get into some of the basics. So 270 new questions. Out of these, there were, of course, 120 that were math, and then 150 that were reading and writing. So not any weird stuff there. For the questions that were re-rated, I actually have this whole diagram. I don't really want this to be the main portion of this video, but you can see here basically what went on. There was pretty much an equal amount that became harder as became easier, and then the majority of them landed on medium difficulty. I really don't think there's too much you could derive from this in terms of things to change about your SAT prep strategy or anything. The one thing you maybe should consider, though, is that it could be the case that the SAT is working on becoming harder. I don't think that's really so much the case, but the fact that they're putting questions that are harder on medium, which happened a lot in this one, could be indicating that they're trying to make medium encompass more and more difficulties and make harder even harder than it is right now. Now, that is not at all confirmed. There's no evidence to be saying that that is the case, but the SAT possibly could be becoming harder. Okay, now let's get into some of the new stuff they added. So I went ahead and looked through all of these new questions. I scanned through all of them. I didn't do literally every single one, but I looked through all the new ones that are added myself. In addition to it, I ran all of them through Claude and had them run the analytics on them. So that's what all of this that you're about to see is based off of. For the math, the biggest thing that I can definitely see and that we all are talking about here is that there was a lot of geometry and trigonometry in this update. 42% of the new questions added were from geometry and trigonometry, which is pretty big of a difference because only 15% of the regular SAT is geometry and trigonometry. Now, there were some other big discrepancies as well, like there was significantly less algebra and problem solving and data analysis than you typically would expect. But I mean, I think this is by far the most stark thing here. Plus, in addition to this, you can see here a full breakdown of where these different problems were in terms of their difficulty. So for geometry and trigonometry, about 57% of them were in the hard category. Pretty similar numbers for most of the rest in math as well, though algebra had more in the medium by far than all the other ones. So that's basically what happened there. And so as for the geometry, this was the overall breakdown. So you can see a lot of stuff that involves more conceptual knowledge of geometry, like right triangles, circles. This is the kind of stuff where you can't just put something in Desmos and solve it alone. So we did have a lot more of that than expected. But here is where the problems start to appear with people's analysis of this. The first thing that I've heard from some people here is that the SAT is trying to go more towards geometry. Like you're going to open up the August SAT and it's going to have way more geometry questions on it than ever before. Honestly, while this 100% could be the case, I can't 100% say for sure until we actually see the test. I do not think that this is the case. Because the thing with this is, you have to keep in mind, the SAT question bank has a lot of questions already in it. They did not take any questions out of the current question bank, at least to my knowledge. And so we have all these questions already in there. All they are doing is just adding a bit more on top of it. So the fact that there was a lot of geometry here does not change the fact that the whole question bank up until this point has been the same way for years and years at this point. Since 2023, since the digital SAT was made, we keep seeing the same kinds of things overall again and again, and that's where the question bank is from. All we're seeing here is an extra thing added on, and assuming you know how stuff like statistics works, if you watch my video on that on the channel, you would know that this is not fair to say that just because this small percentage of it is geometry focused, that the entire thing is definitely going to be geometry focused. There's no evidence to say that that definitely is the case. I think what a better analysis of this might be is that they're giving you just more types of difficult geometry questions. There maybe could be more difficult geometry questions on the next SAT, and maybe this could be a reflection of that, but probably there's not going to be like a huge amount more geometry questions as a whole. And if I'm wrong about this, I will definitely let you guys know in the comment section after we get the results from the next SAT and let you know. Now, the second thing people are really getting wrong about this, and this is something that people are really badly misinterpreting, is the role of Desmos in these changes. I've heard several people think or assume that this means that the SAT is becoming less Desmos usable because they have all these geometry questions. Obviously you can't use Desmos on geometry and trigonometry, so how would it be usable on this test? But here's what you have to understand. A lot of these geometry questions, in fact almost all of them, still involve Desmos quite heavily. All that changes is that you also need some geometry knowledge as well, some more specific geometry knowledge as for how this stuff works. Let me give you an example here real quick. Over here, we have one of the questions. It's about a right circular cone with a height of 22 centimeters, a base of 18. The volume is, n pi centimeters. What is the value of n? So the first thing we would have to do to solve a problem like this is actually write out what the formula for the volume of a right cone is. And that would be, in case you do not know, pi, then r cubed, and then we do the height of it divided by 3. That is how you get the volume of a cone. And so then with that, I can put in the exact numbers that they gave me. So that I would put in for 9 for the radius, because they say that 18 is the diameter. Then I would put for the height, I would say, 22, and then divide that entire thing altogether by 3. And then what I would have to do, take this new number, so this 1866 number, and then divide that by pi and see what we get to there. So this 593.96. With the rounding errors, this is probably just meant to say 594. And that would be the answer here. What did you notice about this problem? Well, this was a very heavy geometry problem, a very heavy area and volume problem. But literally, I just used Desmos for the entire thing. So just the fact that it was geometry and trigonometry had pretty much nothing to do with whether I could use Desmos on this problem. Geometry and trigonometry are Desmos usable. You can use it all over those kinds of problems. All that changes here is that you might have to have a bit more knowledge. Like, for example, you must know how to use area and volume formulas. You don't need to memorize this formula because they're going to give it to you, but you need to know how to use them. Here's another example. You may see a problem like this here with these two triangles. You may think, okay, there's no way that Desmos could be usable on this problem. But let me actually go ahead and solve it. So it says here that this MR is 18. It says here that the RP is 14. And then it says here that LMR, this whole thing would be 36, and that we're trying to find out what the area of this thing is. So the way that you can actually go ahead and solve this, you actually have to use this concept known as the linear scale factor. I've talked about this in one of the other videos on the channel. Basically, the way it works is first thing I would have to do is do 8 times, let's just say any variable, let's say L, must be equal to 14. Okay, then we know that the scale factor here must be 1.75. And so since we know that this is 36 for the area, we can say 36 times L squared. And now this new number, 110.25, aka 441 divided by 4, or D, it would be the new area of this triangle. The way I just did that is I found out what the linear factor must be, and then I square it because now we're dealing with area rather than just side length. I have a whole video talking about this if you're confused about any part of it. So if you're viewing this new update as like a reason to not go ahead and learn Desmos, you are just completely wrong. You should still understand Desmos. I have a whole Desmos video I just posted a couple days ago. Learn it, understand it. This should still be a really big top priority of yours. The one thing this could theoretically mean is that maybe you just need to know a bit more of the geometry concepts as well. There are a bunch of things in geometry and trigonometry that are not completely apparent, that aren't completely obvious, that you need to actually learn through watching videos on it, through going through courses, whatever. And so that's what you really should be taking away from this, not that Desmos is just unusable or something like that. In addition to this, we have problems like this that we saw with the new update, where it is 100% just Desmos usable. It's a regular advanced math-esque problem, and you can just go ahead and use Desmos like you always have been. So to solve a problem like this, I would just go ahead and type it in here. I'm going to use regression without a table to solve this. All right, this is the basic equation we have here. In case you can't see, all these are 6 at the bottom. I would then have to go ahead and say that x1 is equal to all real numbers because they just say here that a, b, and c are constants. So, inherently it's trying to imply that x is not. And then I can just go ahead and say a plus b plus c to solve the problem, negative 612, which would be the same thing as a. This was also a problem in the new problem set, and as you can see here, it was 100% solvable with Desmos. So just more proof that this is not really true. Okay, let's move on to reading and writing now. So I think there are a couple of very key insights here as well. First thing I want to do, let me go ahead and show you this list here. So these are the new questions that were added. The majority of them were in transitions and then boundaries. As for the very specific topics, there were 67%, yes, hard questions in the boundaries, 24% hard in the transitions. These ones where they're blue represent the ones where they're the most percentage of hard questions out of the ones added. In addition, if you want to see just based off of section, here we have down here, as you can see, the ones where they're the most high percentage of new hard questions were information, ideas, and craft and structure. The first takeaway I really want you to make from this is the fact that there still appear to be some very hard passage questions. There are many very hard ones in this update. That's what is probably being indicated by the fact that we have more information, ideas, and craft and structure questions. I saw many of these questions myself. They are quite hard. And so you do still need to be used to understanding very hard, very complex passages before you take the next SAT. This should not be a surprise for anybody. If it is, then you probably are not really in tune too much with how the SATs have been, because last few SATs, there were many, many hard passage questions, very, very many hard passages that you had to understand to get through those tests. So not really any change in that category, just more of those appear to be what's being added. The next thing I want to draw your attention to are transition questions. Now, the big thing I really want to point out here is these new longer choice transition questions like this one here. So you can see this would be a transition question. It says which has the most logical transition, but these are like very complex and not really common, things that can be used as transitions. By achieving a lofty goal, you probably have never heard anybody say that ever in your entire life, basically beyond the simple coining of a term. So yeah, these are transition questions. They just have more to it. Now, the good thing about these is that I have a whole video on the channel where I talk about how you should be evaluating transition questions. So that's all pretty much the exact same. And for these questions as well, they actually are low-key even easier many times than these regular transition questions. Because oftentimes in transitions, all you're going to get is a choice like this, like specifically or conversely. It's a lot harder to tell what those words mean than, I don't know, beyond the simple coining of a term. Sure, that's a complex thing to say, but there's more to it, so it's easier to tell what's being said. Now, I don't think this is really too much of a surprise because there was some of this on the June SAT, the May SAT, I think even the March SAT. So this is something that has been happening, even probably more SATs before then that I just forgot about. So no real weird stuff there. Third thing I want to point your attention to is just these grammar questions. I'm not going to say that there are like especially hard or weird grammar topics here. There's just the same ones that you've already been seeing, but there definitely just are some kind of weirder, I guess you could say harder grammar questions that you just need to be able to answer well. For example, this one here. At the asteroid impact crater in Mexico, the presence of many fossilized microbacteria which seem to have thrived there despite the extreme heat that persisted after the I don't know how to pronounce this word, impact, claims that bacteria are among the world's most resilient organisms. For one like this, it is very difficult to tell what the correct answer is just by looking at it. Like, just by reading it, I have no idea, in my head automatically what the correct answer must be. What I have to do to solve this is actually look at what is given to me here and look at the context. So the subject we're dealing with here is present. So that would be a singular subject. And that's really important because that basically shows it cannot be A, it also cannot be C for this. Actually, I guess it also cannot be D. Okay, so yeah, therefore it must just be B for the answer here. But if you did not notice that, it would be very hard to tell that this must be reinforces. Like, it's so much stuff in between these that your mind is not going to naturally go there. You must understand grammar rules. If you're going into the SAT just based off of vibes, you're much more likely to make a mistake on a question like this than a student who actually knows the rules. In addition to that, I thought I would show these were all the transition words I saw as being correct answers for the more basic, more simple ones. So if you want to look at this, I don't think there's really anything too weird or shocking with this. I mean, it's just the typical transition words you already know and love. One thing that might be a little bit more useful to you, though, are the vocab words that were used. So these were all the, the bold ones are all the correct ones that we saw, and then the gray ones are the ones that were incorrect. So as I always say to students, you should not make it your goal to memorize a ton of different vocab words, but if it makes you feel better to see some more of them before the test, I guess you can look at these. I thought I'd just throw in a vocab question real quick here. So among stock market investors, the practice of diversification or distributing investment funds across many different companies and many different industries, so basically investing in like multiple different things, is regarded as blank since it protects investors from major losses if the value of one particular company or industry sector falls. So it's basically saying here that if one company goes down, you're not completely screwed. So I would imagine it's probably going to be regarded as smart. It's going to be a good idea basically because it has a good benefit. So then if we look at these ones, which one means smart? Basically the closest by far is prudent. That would be a good idea. Prudent idea means like a knowledgeable, respectable idea. That's why we choose that. Two more quick things I just want to say before we end this video off. First, this idea of predictions. This is going to be a big thing again because it always is a big thing right before the SAT, but you really should not trust these people who claim to have predictions for what is going to be on the next SAT. There is a very, very low chance that what people are just randomly thinking of as for what is going to be on the next SAT is actually what is going to be on there. I had a whole video about this exact thing. You should definitely go ahead and watch that if you want some more insight. But a good example of this was the whole Desmos thing. In the beginning of 2026, there were a lot of people saying that Desmos was going to be unusable on the next SAT. Turns out they were just trying to get clicks, and there was actually literally no basis for this at all. If anything, the March SAT was more Desmos usable. So you really should not trust predictions as being the end-all, be-all for anything. People People could be wrong. There could be less Desmos on next SAT, but you can't absolutely claim that it must be the case. What you should do as a student is try to understand everything as much as you can, at least, close to everything if possible, and then just use whatever you need on the SAT. I know it's a lot. I know that's probably not what you want to hear. You want to hear me say that there's just like one thing you need to study, but unfortunately, this is not the case. Second thing here is to not get overly obsessed with the data. In this video, I just showed you a couple of the key metrics, the amount of questions in each thing, the difficulty things, that stuff. I could show you tons of other metrics. Claude gave me plenty when I put all this information into them. But you should not be focused on that. Trying to watch all these videos, trying to understand perfectly what's in these new question banks is not going to be a thing that actually improves your SAT score. The only thing that will is actually learning the content and practicing the problems. So keep that in mind. If you're just like watching all these videos that you can find online about this exact thing and hoping that you discover something new, it is literally procrastination, as you probably expect. Okay guys, I hope this video actually helps you. Hope you can put some of your fears to rest after watching this maybe a little bit. Definitely give a shot at these new questions regardless. Despite everything I said here, I completely stand by that. These are good questions to practice. Definitely a bunch of hard questions that can give you some good experience. So give those a shot if you can. But that's all for me. Good luck in the SAT and make sure to always stay Gucci.